In the summer of 1985, a 25-year-old garbage truck driver named Marcus Williams made a decision that would haunt him for 3 decades. Marcus worked the early morning routes in Houston, Texas, collecting refuse from banks, businesses, and office buildings before the city came alive. He was described by co-workers as reliable, quiet, and someone who kept to himself. What nobody knew was that Marcus had been watching, learning, and planning something that would change his life forever. On August 14, 1985, Marcus began his shift at 4:30 in the morning, just like any other day. His route included a stop at First National Bank of Houston, where he regularly collected their commercial waste. The bank had recently completed a major renovation of their vault system, and construction debris had been accumulating for weeks. Marcus had noticed patterns in how the bank disposed of materials, particularly the timing of their pickups and the types of containers they used. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. That morning, as Marcus approached the bank's loading dock, he discovered something extraordinary mixed in with the construction debris. Hidden beneath sheets of plastic and discarded drywall were several heavy canvas bags that clearly didn't belong with renovation waste. When Marcus lifted one of the bags, the weight immediately told him this wasn't construction material. The zipper was partially open, revealing stacks of cash bundled with rubber bands. Marcus froze. His heart pounded as he looked around the empty loading dock. The sun hadn't risen yet, and the streets were deserted. In that moment, he faced a choice that would define the next 30 years of his existence. He could report the discovery to his supervisor, contact the bank, and do the right thing. Or he could load those bags into his truck and disappear into the Texas morning. The bags contained $3.2 million in unmarked bills. Later, investigations would reveal that the money had been temporarily stored in the bank's old vault system during the renovation. A clerical error had resulted in the bags being mistakenly included with construction debris scheduled for disposal. Bank employees assumed the bags contained old paperwork or damaged materials from the vault cleaning. Marcus made his decision quickly. He loaded the bags into his truck, completed his route as if nothing had happened, and then called in sick for the remainder of the week. By the time bank officials discovered the missing money and launched an investigation, Marcus had already begun executing a plan he'd never imagined he would need. The investigation that followed was extensive. FBI agents interviewed every employee who had access to the construction site. They examined security footage, though the loading dock had limited camera coverage. They questioned Marcus along with dozens of other city workers, contractors, and bank personnel. Marcus maintained his composure during the interview, explaining that he had collected the usual debris and noticed nothing unusual. His clean record and reputation for reliability worked in his favor. Within a month, the investigation stalled. Without clear evidence pointing to any specific individual, and with hundreds of people having access to the renovation site, authorities had no solid leads. The case remained open, but active investigation efforts gradually diminished as other priorities emerged. Meanwhile, Marcus had made a decision that demonstrated remarkable self-control. Instead of spending the money immediately, which would have certainly attracted attention, he buried it. Not in some remote location, but in his own backyard, sealed in waterproof containers and hidden beneath a carefully maintained vegetable garden. He continued working his garbage route, living in the same modest apartment, driving the same beat-up pickup truck. For months, Marcus lived with the knowledge that millions of dollars lay buried just steps from his back door. He told no one. Not his girlfriend, not his family, not his closest friends. The secret consumed him, but he understood that patience was his only protection. Any sudden change in lifestyle would invite scrutiny he couldn't afford. Years passed. Marcus continued his routine, showing up for work, collecting garbage, maintaining his unremarkable existence. The FBI case grew cold. Bank officials wrote off the loss and improved their security procedures. The story occasionally appeared in local newspapers on slow news days, but public interest faded. Marcus had successfully vanished into plain sight, hiding among the millions of working people who formed the invisible backbone of the city. But carrying such a secret exacted a psychological toll. Marcus developed insomnia, constantly worried about discovery. He became increasingly paranoid, convinced that coworkers were watching him, that neighbors suspected something. Every knock at his door sent his heart racing. Every police car in his neighborhood made him sweat. The money that was supposed to provide freedom had become a prison of anxiety and fear. By 1990, 5 years after the theft, Marcus began to consider whether he had made a terrible mistake. The money remained buried, untouched, while his mental health deteriorated. He had gained financial security on paper, but lost his peace of mind entirely. He started seeing a therapist, carefully avoiding any mention of the real source of his anxiety. He claimed work stress and relationship problems were causing his sleepless nights. The therapist recommended lifestyle changes. Marcus began exercising more, took up gardening as a hobby, which provided perfect cover for maintaining the burial site. He planted tomatoes, peppers, and herbs directly above the hidden fortune. Neighbors often complimented his green thumb, not knowing they were standing over millions of dollars in stolen cash. As the years progressed, Marcus watched inflation erode the purchasing power of his buried treasure. $3.2 million in 1985, money would be worth significantly more by the mid-90s, but only if it could be spent safely. The bills themselves were becoming outdated as currency designs changed. Marcus realized that time was working against him in multiple ways. In 1995, 10 years after the theft, Marcus made his first attempt to access the money. He carefully excavated a single bundle of bills, planning to exchange them gradually through various legitimate channels. But when he examined the cash under proper lighting, he discovered that moisture had begun affecting some of the bills despite his waterproofing efforts. Mold had started forming on several bundles. The paper money was slowly degrading in its underground hiding place. This discovery forced Marcus to confront a harsh reality. His perfect plan was imperfect. The money was deteriorating, and his window for safely spending it was closing. He needed to act, but any significant financial activity would require explanation. How could a garbage truck driver suddenly afford major purchases without raising suspicions? Marcus spent months developing new strategies. He researched money laundering techniques, studied legitimate investment opportunities, and explored ways to gradually introduce cash into his life without triggering investigations. He considered moving to another state, creating a new identity, or claiming lottery winnings. Each option carried risks that could unravel 3 decades of careful concealment. The psychological pressure intensified as Marcus approached middle age. He had sacrificed his 20s and 30s to protect a secret that was literally rotting in the ground. Friends had married, started families, bought homes, and built careers while Marcus remained frozen in place, unable to move forward with his life. The money that was supposed to provide freedom had become the bars of his cage. By the year 2000, 15 years after the theft, Marcus faced a crisis that would force him to make another life-changing decision. His aging mother required expensive medical care that his garbage collector salary couldn't cover. For the first time since burying the money, Marcus had a legitimate reason to need significant cash immediately. The medical bills for his mother's cancer treatment totaled over $200,000. Insurance covered only a fraction of the costs, and Marcus watched helplessly as the woman who raised him suffered while he sat on a fortune buried in his backyard. The irony was devastating. He possessed more money than most people would see in a lifetime, yet he couldn't help the person who mattered most to him. Marcus began making careful withdrawals from his buried cash. He told his mother he had been saving money for years, working overtime shifts, and had taken out loans. She never questioned his explanations, trusting her son's dedication to her care. Over 6 months, Marcus gradually introduced nearly $300,000 into his financial life, using multiple banks and carefully structured deposits to avoid triggering federal reporting requirements. The process of accessing his own money proved more complicated than Marcus had anticipated. Many of the bills from 1985 were no longer in circulation. Bank tellers occasionally questioned the condition and age of the currency he deposited. Marcus prepared explanations about inheriting the money from a deceased relative who had hoarded cash for decades. His story held up under casual scrutiny, but each transaction increased his anxiety about potential discovery. His mother's treatment was successful. The cancer went into remission, and she regained her strength. Marcus felt a mixture of relief and guilt. He had finally used the stolen money for something meaningful, but the act of spending it made the theft feel real again. For 15 years, the buried cash had existed almost like a fantasy. Now it was actively changing his life, and there was no going back. Word spread in his neighborhood about Marcus's generosity toward his mother. Friends and coworkers praised his dedication and sacrifice. They assumed he had emptied his savings and taken on debt to cover the medical expenses. Marcus accepted their admiration while knowing the truth about his financial situation. The praise felt like another weight added to his already heavy conscience. By 2005, 20 years after the theft, Marcus faced new challenges. His garbage collection job was being eliminated due to city budget cuts and automation. At 45 years old, he needed to find new employment or risk losing the legitimate income that provided cover for his lifestyle. The prospect of job interviews, background checks, and financial scrutiny terrified him. Marcus used the transition as an opportunity to relocate. He moved to Austin, Texas, claiming he wanted a fresh start after his mother's health scare. In reality, he needed distance from anyone who might have known him during the original investigation. He purchased a modest house with cash, explaining to real estate agents that he had sold family property inherited from his deceased mother. The move allowed Marcus to access more of his buried fortune. He had retrieved approximately $800,000 over the years, leaving roughly $2.5 million still hidden in Houston. Before leaving, he carefully excavated the remaining money, discovering that nearly 20% of the bills had suffered significant damage from moisture and time. The deterioration was accelerating. In Austin, Marcus reinvented himself as a small business owner. He opened a landscaping company, using his experience with gardening and outdoor work as credibility. The business provided legitimate income and explained his ability to make cash transactions. He hired several employees, paid taxes, and gradually established himself as a respectable member of the community. The landscaping business became Marcus's method for laundering the remaining stolen money. He created fictitious contracts with imaginary clients, generated fake invoices, and reported the stolen cash as business income. The process was slow and required careful attention to detail, but it allowed him to gradually convert the illegal money into legitimate assets. Marcus's new life in Austin brought him a sense of normalcy he hadn't experienced in decades. He dated occasionally, made friends through his business, and began to imagine a future where the theft was truly behind him. But the secret still consumed him. Every relationship remained superficial because he couldn't risk genuine intimacy with someone who might discover his past. In 2010, 25 years after the theft, Marcus made a mistake that nearly destroyed everything he had built. During a routine audit of his landscaping business, an IRS agent noticed inconsistencies in his reported income patterns. The agent flagged several years where Marcus's cash deposits significantly exceeded what would be expected from a small landscaping operation in Austin. The audit expanded into a broader investigation of Marcus's financial history. Agents requested bank records going back to his move to Austin, examined his business contracts, and began interviewing clients. Marcus maintained his composure during interviews, but privately he was terrified. He had survived FBI investigation immediately after the theft, only to face potential exposure 25 years later through tax enforcement. Marcus hired an expensive attorney and cooperated fully with the audit. He provided documentation for every transaction, explained his business practices, and submitted to extensive questioning. The investigation lasted 8 months before concluding that while his record-keeping was poor, there was no evidence of intentional tax evasion. Marcus paid additional taxes and penalties but avoided criminal charges. The near miss with the IRS forced Marcus to confront how much his life remained defined by events from 1985. He was 50 years old, financially secure, and running a successful business. Yet he lived in constant fear of discovery. The stolen money had provided material comfort but robbed him of peace, genuine relationships, and authentic success. Marcus began considering options he had never seriously contemplated. He researched statute of limitations laws, wondering if enough time had passed to reduce his legal exposure. He considered anonymous tips to authorities about the location of any remaining evidence from the original theft. He even drafted letters confessing his crime, though he never sent them. The internal struggle intensified as Marcus approached the 30th anniversary of the theft. He had successfully hidden his crime for longer than many people's entire careers. The original FBI agents who investigated the case had retired. Bank officials who reported the missing money had moved on. Most evidence from 1985 had been destroyed or archived. Yet Marcus remained trapped by his secret. In early 2015, Marcus made a decision that would bring his 3-decade ordeal full circle. He returned to Houston for the first time in a decade, driving past the bank where it all began. The building had been renovated again, and the loading dock where he discovered the money was barely recognizable. Marcus sat in his car, watching employees arrive for work, remembering the terrified 25-year-old who had made a split-second decision that consumed his entire adult life. That evening, Marcus dug up the last remnants of evidence from his old backyard. The new owners had maintained his vegetable garden, unknowingly tending the soil that had hidden millions of dollars for 2 decades. He found fragments of the original waterproof containers, now brittle and cracked, along with scraps of deteriorated currency that would never again see circulation. Marcus Williams had successfully stolen $3.2 million and hidden it for 30 years. He had evaded FBI investigation, reinvented his identity, and built a legitimate business empire. By any criminal measure, his plan had worked flawlessly. Yet, as he held the last physical evidence of his crime, Marcus realized the true cost of his success. The money had given him financial security but stolen his peace of mind. It had provided material comfort but prevented genuine relationships. It had offered freedom but created a prison of secrecy and fear. Marcus had won the game but lost 3 decades of authentic living. The question that haunts every perfect crime is whether the victory was worth the price paid to achieve it.